she's had to listen to me talk about this school for the last several months. So she's heard it all. Thank you for asking me to do this. I just want you all to know that I was not their first choice. First choice was my dad, who was back there in the background. To get started tonight, I want to start with a survey. How many of you either taught, were a student at, or otherwise worked at Pleasant View School? Okay, most of you are older than I am. And you are perhaps far more familiar with some of the stories and the history than I am. And so please, if you have something that you want to add, raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over and I'll give you the floor for a time. Okay. I also, before the evening is over, I'm going to point out those who were former teachers and faculty there. I recognize at least, I think most of them. Yeah, I'm going to do it. When I think of one-room schoolhouses, I think of, Laura Ingalls Wilder and, the 1800s. But as I did some research into this, we have one-room schoolhouses right here, just that direction from Washington, until 1948. We have one of the former teachers right here. Okay, not in Washington, but so Pleasant View didn't even exist until 1948, when 5 of these schools decided that their populations had become too small, or that the needs and the demands of educating these students had gotten too great to do it in just one room. If you look at how they were organized, and I have some pictures here of where these schools originally were that I'm going to pass around. These schools were located, there was one school on almost every east-west road all across that side of the county. The northernmost school was on Dutch Lane, and then the next road to the south was Kruger Road. They had their own school. The next road to the south was Route 24. That had its own school. The next road to the south was Guth Road, which didn't have its school, sorry. The next road to the south was Irish Lane, which also had its own school. And the road to the south of that was Cooper, or is Cooper, which also had its own school. And I told you about what they were. Located at Dutch Lane was the former Liberty School. I will pass these around there. There's some captions for these pictures. All of these buildings are still standing, except one. Okay? And I did not have the one on Kruger Road. Cottonwood School is no longer standing. But all of the rest of them are. You can drive past them today and see them.
Cottonwood School was on South Main, Washington.
Cottonwood was on South Main?
It's there now. It still has the District 21 over the...
So they moved the building?
It's not there, but it's on South Main.
Okay, so it used to be on Kruger, but they moved it to South Main, where it is today. All right. I was going to spend some time with Harold this weekend preparing. But Harold's sister-in-law passed away on Thursday. Yeah, I did not bother him for that. But I was the best way to plan today. So, this is Cottonwood and the original Pleasant View School, which was located on Route 24. The Winkler family lives there today. That was next to the property that where Harold and Alice lived out there in the country, as I recall. This is the former Liberty School, which was on Dutch Lane. Stormer School, that was also on Dutch Lane. One of those schools on Dutch Lane was at the corner, I believe, of Dutch and what is the Metamora Blacktop. That school did not consolidate until 1961, so they were not part of the original 5. 2005. This is the former Jefferson School. And the former Green Ridge, which is on Irish Lane. Today this building is still there, but it's currently unoccupied. So what was life like in these little one-room schoolhouses? Some of the things that I've read indicate that they didn't have these modern conveniences of running water, even as late as 1948. The students would have to go hand dip their water at the start of each day, pour it into a cooler, and make sure that they had enough water for drinking and hand washing to last all day. And I would imagine that the students who were responsible, the boys, for getting the water made sure that that water lasted all day long. And the teacher did it, and the boys did it too, also. But the teacher in the winter would have to arrive at least an hour early so that she could light the stove. And those stoves were not heated with wood, they were heated with corn cobs. And many area farmers took it upon themselves to make sure that the corn cobs were always stocked for the school to stay warm. Well, in 1948, before 1948, let me pass around another picture. This was the students in Pleasant View School in the early 1900s. Some of the students, where they were able to figure out their names, I'll start this over here because they didn't have that. You may recognize some people there. This was Pleasant View in 1904. However, by the late 40s, Pleasant View itself was down to just 6 students. And they decided that that's just not enough to justify having that small school. So in 1948, 5 of those districts decided to go together, and then Guth Road got its school. They decided to locate it there. They purchased the property from Calvary Mennonite Church, which is currently located on Jefferson here in Washington. But before, that property had been East Church, East Mennonite Church. And then when Pleasant View bought it, they put a school there that they had to build twice. If you're not familiar with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Lavone Adams right now. Her husband was involved in this construction both times. And this is what, as I was speaking to Mrs. Freeberg last night, she referred to as the union problem.
That was it, all right. My husband had the school all finished and ready to go. And one morning, he'd been threatened by the union. That was back when the union was using force. And they had been after him for quite a while, because he was one of the biggest builders at that time, to get him to join the union. But he would not do it. He was doing a lot of building. He had 40 men working for him. And they were bound they were going to get him. So he'd been threatened. And so we waiting one morning. It was pretty early. Heard this terrible boom. And right away, Will said, there goes the school. Because he knew he'd been threatened. Well, we found, of course, nothing was done back then. So we found out that they had sent down some thugs from Chicago. And they moved the school up. And we were there, very thankful, though, for the night watchman. It was a Mr. Wright, who lived right across the road. And he was there, they left, or waited till he left. And so they just turned around, tore it all down, and built it again. But then he had to join the union. And because the insurance company wouldn't accept it. But I always think that helped Willis. He got sick. He died 2 years later. He was 9 when he got to school. He died at 41 because he was so stressed out, thinking that he had to call in a certain thing and another man for this and another man for that. But he was used to, he had all kinds of men working for him that were experts in their field and could do it. But that's what happened to the school. So otherwise, history I don't know about, but I do know about that.
In fact, the man, Mr. Wright, who had been keeping an eye on the school, had walked by they figured the charges were set by the front door, and he had been there not 10 minutes before. If you drive out there today, he lived in that white house, which is just to the south. That explosion blew every window out of that house. Where are Ron and Mary living? Okay. They live on Booth Road, about a mile and a half to the east, right? And you heard that explosion. As I recall, you telling me quite vividly. What's that?
About 5:30 in the morning.
About 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, and the press reports indicated that the explosion was heard for 10 miles away. It happened, I believe, on May 19th, 1949, and school opened that fall. They got it rebuilt. And they didn't have to tear it all down, just most of it. And they managed to open up school on schedule that fall, which your husband must have really got to work after that. So thank you very much for building what was, for being a part of that construction. When they did it, the original part of the school is not what's there today. When it was built, it only had 4 classrooms, 2 bathrooms, and somebody help me out. It was the gymnasium part of the original, and a gymnasium. And a lunchroom gymnasium, thank you. But then, in the 60s, they decided that, the school was too big. What were some of the problems that we hear about in education today? Overcrowding, right? Too many kids in a classroom? Well, there was a classroom, a teacher, here we go, who was teaching with 40 students in one room. Yeah. And they weren't all in one grade. They were probably in grades 2 and 3, or maybe 2, 3, and 4, that she had 40 students in one room. And we have some former teachers here who can maybe tell you what it's like to teach 2 grades at the same time. Some things about, because Pleasant View was a country school, it was rural, it was small. In everything that I read, memoirs from teachers, from former students, from this wonderful history report of the school that the class of 1980 put together. Ron and Mary's daughter did that. Carol was part of this group that put it together. There are a couple of things that keep showing up that made Pleasant View special. One of those things that kept coming up was, because it was small, they had individualized instruction. We have newspaper articles about how Pleasant View's test scores were the best in the Tri-County area. Okay, this small little school with less than 100 students and only 6 teachers. Or maybe 7, I think, at one time. And so academically, the school did very, very well. We had a number of students go on to become valedictorian of Washington Community High School. Harold was one of those. And if they weren't valedictorian, they were certainly in the top 10. I know in my class at the high school, let's keep in mind, my 8th grade class at Pleasant View, there were 14 of us. In the top 10, I think we had 4 students. Maybe 3 or 4 students. I was not one of them. Another thing that kept popping up was the sense of community. At Pleasant View, we had this thing that we called community club. The big schools in town had the Parent-Teacher Association. At Pleasant View, we didn't have that. We had the community club. And That's because it involved more than just parents. It involved literally anybody who lived in the district. And the community club would hold monthly meetings when everybody would come together. They would sometimes get speakers to come in. And while the parents were all in the gymnasium listening to the speaker, they put the students over in one of the classrooms and had those old reel projectors. And they would show the students the movie. We had some things that were annual events. One of those was bingo night. Anybody remember that? yeah, it gets about bingo night. And the whole gymnasium was full. There were probably 130, 140 people. We also had, I heard somebody say a potluck. That's right, we had potlucks too. And the other thing that I remember most, along with bingo night, was roller skating. We'd take everybody over to the old Washington roller rink, and we'd rent that place for an evening. Community was one of those things. I would say probably, just based on my own observation and recollection, which it's been a few years now, I would say we probably had at least 80%, maybe 90 or better, of all the parents involved in the community club. I think schools today would do a backflip if they could get parental involvement at 90%. Why was it that high? I think one of the reasons that it was that high is because they had to. If you want to do these things, and when you don't have masses of people to work with, somebody has to step up. And there was something for everybody to do. The biggest event that we had all year, or the biggest event of the year, every year, was the pancake and sausage supper on the first Saturday of December, which sent my mom into labor. And my sister was born later that night. And Rachel was 6 weeks early. But that was the one event that I think the calendar was based on. Everything kind of led up to that, and everything was after that throughout the school year. And I think one year we fed 1,200 people. We ran out of food. And we scrambled, but we got some. In that little gym, we fed 1,200 people. Another thing that was constantly, that came up in all of these reports that I read, was athletics. If you wanted to play a sport, you could. And because of that, and not only could you play, you could start to play in 5th grade. At the town schools, I recall, if you were lucky, you could make a team in 6th grade. But we got to start in 5th grade. Part of that was because we needed the bodies. But because of that, once you get to high school, if you've had 4 years of coaching and training in a sport, you're that much ahead of the other guys. And it's one of the things that also kept coming up was how many former Pleasant View athletes went on to play varsity sports here at Washington. Does the name Todd Foster ring any bells? Okay, today Todd is an assistant coach for Purdue University. I got to guard him in practice. But Todd was not the only exceptional athlete that we had. Another one was Eric McGraw. This trophy right here was a state 3rd place trophy. It's a team trophy. We had one person make it to the state track meet that year, that was Erica, and she won 3 events. And so we got a nice team trophy. I will explain some of what these things are here. In order to find the trophies, most of you know Pleasant View is not open anymore. I called Dr. Grisham, who is the superintendent of District 52 now, which is the district that Pleasant View consolidated into. Let him know what I was doing and asked him if they still had any of those old trophies. I've seen the trophy case up in the middle school, and none of our stuff is in it. And so he sent me over to the Park District, which is the old middle school, and said they're all in the boiler room somewhere. So Friday, I went over and rummaged around for about an hour to an hour and a half. This was about all I could find. I know it's out there somewhere. If anybody knows, let me know, and then we'll see if they're in great places. Wonderful. If they're just sitting by, we'll see if we can't find something to do with them. But this is the oldest trophy I could find. The statue on it is obviously broken, but it's from 1976. It was the Class A sectional runner-up, second place. I have a hunch it was basketball, just because the foot looks like the feet on some of the other trophies. But this was the oldest one I could find that was definitely a Pleasant View trophy. There were older ones, but I think they probably were District 52 trophies. This was the only one that I know was Pleasant View because it said Class A. If you get much older than this, the trophies don't say what class it was for. They'd be lucky if it tells you if it was boys or girls. So this one is the oldest one I could find. Some other things that we have here, we have the old MVP trophy for basketball. And if you want to know what all basketball MVPs were, you can come up afterwards and read this. Again, I was not one of them. And found this trophy here. This was the year 1986, when both our 7th and 8th grade basketball teams won that county tournament. And I'll be honest, we won that year because of Todd Foster. He was in 7th grade, and the rules allowed him to play both 7th and 8th grade. And we won a lot of games in 4 years, thanks to him. Probably the best success we ever had was in 1987, when we made it, our 8th grade team made it to the state championship game against Griggsville, I think it was. And the only thing I remember is we lost by 5 points. After having a 5-point lead at halftime. That's how it goes. Our volleyball team, I think, got more state trophies than basketball teams did, because we had a great run in the mid to late 80s and 90s. There are several 3rd and 4th place trophies that the volleyball teams earned in the city play as well. Okay. I was told I was supposed to speak for 20 minutes. I'm pushing 25 now. If you'll bear with me, I want to talk about a few more things. When I think of what Pleasant View was when I was there, and I think of what schools have become, or what we've lost. I don't want to say that our schools today are bad, because I think District 52 is doing a good job. I'm a school bus director there. And I say that not just because I work for them, but I like what I see there. But what are some of the things that we lost? I think we lost the community. We lost, I'm not saying the students aren't doing well, but you lost some of that individualized instruction. The 1980s was a difficult time. Most of you probably remember for education funding in Illinois. The push was towards larger schools, consolidation, get everybody together under one roof and save some money. And so the state kind of, at least this is how I remember it, being told, didn't quite live up to all of its obligations for funding. My dad back there was president of the board for a number of those years, and I just remember shaking his head saying, what do we do? What do we do? In 1988, I believe it was, the school put a referendum on the ballot to raise the property tax rate by 40 cents. That was in response to declining valuations of the property within the district. 90% of Pleasant View was farmland. And during the 80s, the value of farmland continued to go down and down and down. And when most of your school's revenue comes from property taxes, well, your revenue goes down and down and down. Well, 5 years later, that referendum failed, by the way, by 3 votes. The initial election night, the night it was reported on TV, the difference was, I And so the board requested a recount, and it was a little bit closer. Now, I won't talk about that. If you want to know more about that election, talk to my dad, who's back there in the background. He'll tell you what he thinks about it. But 5 years later, the school tried another referendum. This time they were asking for $1 because property values did not come back, and the school continued to sink financially. In a last-ditch effort to pass the referendum, the school board produced a 8-minute video touting the wonders of Pleasant View School. Mrs. King is in it. She's back there. A number of other teachers, Donna Harris, who was the first grade teacher at the time, was also part of this video. And they even had some parents who talked on video. Actually, they wrote a script on the video. And then I'd asked around, does anybody know, is this mass produced for every house in the district? Did everybody get one of these?
I don't think everyone did, no. They were part of the copies were made, but not for everyone did.
Okay, and as it turned out, if you look at it by precinct, most everybody wanted the school to stay open, except for just a few geographical areas where it was overwhelming. They wanted to send their kids to town schools. And being a bus driver, I know that route today. I don't drive it. Dixie Biggs does. She's been driving it for more than 30 years. But a lot of those parents out there now send their kids to private school. They wanted a public school, and now they send their kids to private school. That's how it works out, unfortunately.
Do you have the results of the standardized tests for that year that they closed?
No, I don't. I did find in the basement over at the Park District, I did find my sister's 8th grade cumulative folder.
Where's some money too?
I didn't keep it. I know where it is. I can probably go get it. But I looked at it, and my sister went from being an A/B student to a A+ student. And one of the things she'll tell you is that her entire 8th grade year was reviewed. The whole year. They were doing a good job, I think. And a number of people thought that you can't learn with just 6 or 7 students in your class. And I think my sister's past proved that wrong.
As I recall, that last year, when the school closed, the results of the test, this is the standardized test of state closed. Pleasant View was first in 2 categories. In the 3rd category, I think they were 7th. And that's for the entire Tri-County area.
The video says they were first in everything except math, but they were still in the top 10 in math.
Correct. I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it said. Now, in the interest of self-disclosure, I went to Pleasant View. My mom went to Pleasant View. My grandpa was on the board at Pleasant View, and my grandmother was the cook there for more than 10 years. And she was one of several excellent cooks. Yeah, you're all nodding your heads. They made things from scratch back then, including the bread. Each day. Now, we didn't have that when I was there. But I'll just show you one story that my grandma told me. She served chili one day, and the students didn't eat it. They returned it. She said, "Why don't you like this chili?" "Well, it's got beans in it." Okay. Well, the next time she served chili, she took the beans, mashed them up, ground them up, mixed them in, served the chili. Mrs. Midman, this is the best chili we have ever had. She was not the only good cook we had. A couple other about discipline. Maud's there. Are there any of her descendants here? Okay. I heard she was very strict.
Yes, sir. I sat in many a corner.
Yes. Discipline at that time was one of three things: stand in the corner, stand in the hallway, sit in the corner, or the good old-fashioned paddle, which was still in use when I was a kindergarten in 1979. I know it was one of my classmates got.
Have lunch, that was the one you commanded.
Yes.
Nobody talked about.
Nobody was allowed to talk. You could say, please pass the salt, but that was it. And if you didn't finish your lunch, you got in trouble.
Wow.
You couldn't go out for recess. Just a second. And there were some other things that she didn't approve of. Apparently there was a bar in the boys' bathroom that the boys liked to do chin-ups on. There's some people that know about that. And her way of catching the delinquents who were doing chin-ups in the boys' bathroom was to put ink. She put ink on that bar. And if you had dirty fingers, you were in trouble. Some other interesting things. They used to have, in the fall, they would have garden shows. The students would bring in produce from their gardens or from their flower beds. Actually, their parents do it, but they have to take credit for it. They would have competitions. Every year on May 1st, they'd have a May Day celebration. There was the May Bowl. I remember Ms. Corson telling us about that. And there's a picture of it in some of these books up here. What were some of the things that we did? I know there was more. At this time, I want to read to you some memories from a couple of teachers. I had so many fond memories of my 30 years at Pleasant View School, I could write a book. When I began at PD in 1962, I soon learned that the Christmas program was a big event. All 8 grades participated in an old-fashioned play, complete with props, costumes, and plenty of practice. So it would be perfect. I'm going to take a time out. Now at our schools, we have them divided up by age, and they almost never mingle with kids who are older or younger than them. Wasn't the case there. Okay. Big kids helped little ones, and a lot of work turned into a lot of fun. Mrs. McKee was first grade teacher, and because we had no music teacher, she filled in playing the piano and choosing the songs. She knew the talent in the school, and with the help of everyone, she brought out the best. Religious songs and plays were included. Until the city building was torn down, we would load the kids on a bus and go uptown for a final dress rehearsal before the program that night. After that, a makeshift stage was put up each year in the gym, but it was not quite the same as it was at the city building. A music teacher was hired, and the programs became more musical, of course. But those early programs were fantastic, and I will always cherish those memories. Donna Harris, who taught there from 1962 to 1994. And one from Gwen Broad, who was a student. In one of the grades, I think 4th, we were given the option of selling greeting cards in order to earn a Bible. I'm sure the neighbors all wanted to hide when they saw me coming. I did earn a very nice Bible, which I still have to this day. Mine, things have changed. And one last one. Pleasant View certainly lived up to its name. The rural setting with a pasture of sheep across the road always seemed peaceful and pleasantly secure. Small class sizes allowed for special activities. In my class, I loved having an old-fashioned school day. We dressed up in outfits like the days of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Some of us walked to school from Berger's farm, carrying our lunches in baskets or pails, and our books in book straps. Once at school, we had old-time penmanship practice, poetry recitation, arithmetic, worked on slates, spelling bees, and old recess games like blind man's bluff and marbles. Another advantage of being a small school was sometimes an impromptu field trip. We loaded the children on the bus and drove to town to see the beavers and the dam they were building on the creek near Knollcrest and Lawndale Streets. That was quite a sight to see all the beavers at work. Christmas pageants were a big thing at Pleasant View. We practiced for days after Thanksgiving to memorize parts and master crops for a community performance on a makeshift stage in the gym. I especially remember doing a Walton's Christmas one year and a scene from Laura Ingalls Wilder another. Santa always arrived at the end, ringing the old PV bell, much to everyone's delight. In the early years of Pleasant View, lunches were hot and home cooked right in our own school kitchen. We had a reputation for the best school lunches around. Double grades were a challenge, but also a benefit. Class sizes were small, each grade learned to be independent workers, and listening in on the other grades didn't hurt either. We taught our own PE and art and, for a while, music. The kids always moaned and groaned when it came time to learn some square and folk dances. But when we had the Western hoedown, at the end, everyone had a fun time. And that was the truth. Community Club was truly a family school event. Parents and teachers attended a meeting, often with a guest speaker, while the children watched a movie in one classroom. PE's annual pancake supper was looked forward to by the entire area. End of school was celebrated with an all-school picnic. When Mr. Paxton was superintendent, we bused the kids to Kennel Lake and would spend the day there. That is from Judy Corson, who taught there in 1972. Is when you were hired? 69. Yeah, I remember that now. And she was there until it closed and taught at District 52 for a few years. Okay, at this time, I would like to ask the former teachers and administrators who are here tonight, if you guys could stand up. One last story. When I was in college at Brown University, I was in the English writing class. And halfway through the semester, my professor came to me and said, "Paul, where did you learn how to write?" That's what I told him. I said, "I learned in 5th grade. We had to do a book report every 2 weeks. And then in junior high, we had to do one every 3 weeks. And it was those teachers, and Miss Hamilton, Mrs. Cahill, up here, who had such an impact, not only on my life, but on Jill, on Bree, and so many others. And not just them, but all the other teachers who were there. That's Pleasant View. If you have more that you would like to say, be it a memory or something, I'll be more than happy to give you the microphone.
I just have a question. What's happened to the building? I mean, who owns
That is an excellent question. I don't know the guy's name. Dr. Gerstrom asked me to apologize for the condition of that building. It is not District 52's fault, though. They sold it, man bought it, and he has put a bit of a machine shop in out there. He also, yes, it's privately owned. And when they sold the old middle school, he told me they were very intentional about who they sold it to, because they didn't want that to happen again. Yeah, good question. Any more questions? Anybody?
I was in Iowa when I was in
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even know that I wasn't a kid.
Sam?
When Bob Paxton spoke at the first of the community club meetings when he had been hired there, and kind of gave an indication of how the community and school work together, because he said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to bargain with you. If you'll believe only half what the kids say about me when they come home, I'll believe only half what they say about you when you come to school."
That sounds like something Bob Paxton would say. I did not know what I found out tonight, that he went to Pleasant View after he retired from District 52.
I didn't attend Pleasant View School, as you know, now it's a one-room schoolhouse. But I worked for Pleasant View School as one of the first bus drivers. And we didn't had to Washington Road was blacktop. And Route 24 was blacktop and the rest was gravel. The County Road, Deer Creek Road was better gravel. And I don't know how often we were stuck and had to go to a bigger farm or get a tractor and pull us out. And
That still happens. You remember the big snow before Thanksgiving last year? Harold's son, Rudy, was driving out on Liberty Lane and in the middle of the road got stuck in the snow. Still happens.
that happened to me. They didn't used to call school off. And I was a driver, they never called it off, so we had the bus out at the farm, so I started out. And I got on, I guess it's Eagle Road now, I got about halfway between there and I call it Oracle Camps. The old bus just quit on us. I had about 7 students on, and a few of the girls were going to stay somewhere that evening, and they had little satchels with them or bags and clothes. So they put all those clothes on that they could get and gave them some other kids. So we did the unpardoned when we left the bus. We didn't have a radio, we had nothing. We left the bus and crossed the creek there and got in behind the hedge fence. We walked up to Oracle Camps. And by the time we got there, we were a bunch of cold I remember he called in, and I think Van Pepper was in charge to get the snow off. And he sent the maintainer out to the old weed plow, and he rescued us. And they called around, and people came to pick up their own students. I did attend the one room school out of Pleasant View, and I was the only one in my grade in 6th grade. And I finished my work well into the year, and I didn't have much to do, so the teacher gave me some embroidery work to do. Believe it or not, I still do it.
All right. Anybody else have anything? Mary Jo Parrish was one of the superintendents. She followed Bob Paxson.
I did not follow Bob Paxson.
Well, that's not an enviable place to be.
I couldn't fill Bob Paxson's shoes. I was superintendent / principal / social studies teacher / math teacher / health teacher. And because there was only a half-day custodian, I think I was half-day custodian too. So the taxpayers really got their money's worth out of their faculty here at Pleasant View. I have a whole row of people here that I brought with me tonight from Pleasant View, and I'm going to pass this microphone on down because they all have stories to tell. When he said that I followed Bob Paxson was the school, and I couldn't begin to replace him. And I think his daughter can tell you a little bit about that.
I'm sorry, I just jumped up.
I'm passing it on back.
My name is Michelle Lukovich, and I was at Pleasant View for the last year that it was open, and I currently teach at District 52. I was raised in Joliet, quite a big city compared to Washington. When I moved down here with my dad at Caterpillar, and I graduated from Washington High School. And then last year I was a teacher's aide / PE teacher. And it was the first nice day of springtime. Go outside and work, playing. One little boy comes up and says, "Miss Lukovich, there's the horse." "Yes, that's a horse." No, look at the hole in the fence. Here comes the horse across the street onto the playground. So I had to go get Mr. Artman. And so Mrs. Antel, Tim walked his horse back. I've never had a horse since come in my school, but I was only there for a year, but I worked with some great people, and I really enjoyed my time out. It was a lovely school. I wasn't expecting to say anything. I'm Judy Gorson. I was at Pleasant View. It was my first teaching job. I was there for 25 years, and I have to say, memories get better as I get older. It's a wonderful experience. It's a great place.
We have one more.
I'm Jamie Cahill. I was Miss Hamilton, and I had Scott, and Paul, sorry, and some of the rest of you. And I left Pleasant View when our oldest son was born. I took a maternity leave at Christmas time, and that was really hard to do, to leave in the middle of the year. But Dawn Harris had been teaching kindergarten, and she stepped up into the first grade position, so at least I knew the children would be with somebody that they knew. I think I loved it so much because of being such a close-knit community. You had so much support from the families. They helped on field trips. I remember Mrs. Vickers would do an art thing, and if you were a French artist, she dressed up and brought little desserts, little French desserts and things. When my own older son went to school, I guess I kind of expected it to be like it was at Pleasant View. Of course it was. We live in Beacon, and they had lots of computers. They were technologically very advanced. But I will say I wish he could have gone to Pleasant View, where the teachers were so dedicated and there was that close-knit atmosphere. In addition to all the things that I mentioned that Bob did, I also think he coached the baseball team, drove the school bus to every athletic event, and Marilyn was right there with him. When a cook couldn't come, I saw Bob out in the kitchen helping. And Mr. Salter couldn't be there to get the furnace fired up in the morning. Bob did that. I think he did just about everything. So I can probably go on, and I'll keep this to what I do.
This is the very last certificate of recognition from the State Regional Superintendent of Schools, Southern Maryland. We found this in the basement at the Park District. If you come and touch it, be careful, it's about to fall apart. But the back is falling out of it. We have things up here for you to come see. Newspaper clippings, an old yearbook. We didn't have these when I was a student. This is pretty cool. A couple of the last pictures, if you went and you can find yourself in some of these pictures, we wouldn't be in there in jail. It's all stuff old, it's all black and white. So, thank you for coming. I'm encouraged to see how much this small school meant to so many people. It wasn't perfect by any stretch. We had our struggles out there, but it was good. And I've often said if somebody would give me lots of money, I'd make it happen again. All right, thanks for coming.
Well, I think Paul's given us so much to think about. This just shows, and this wonderful turnout just shows what our schools mean to us, and they're still so important to us.
Yes.